Hi, it's Dave from BigCaliforniaEarthquake.com, and I want to just go through the planners and the checklist just to show you guys exactly what my intention was with these and just give you a little bit more information so that you can get the most out of these. So let's jump straight into it, and I'm going to show you the checklist first. So let me just open this up as a PowerPoint, probably be easier for you. There we go. So the first thing you probably notice with them is each of them will have some sort of name down the side of them here. So this one, I've got administration. Now these are all put in specific sections so that you can find them very easily. So this one, administration, is just things like paperwork in effect, so things that you would need paperwork wise that you don't want to be without. So it's real simple things and some more sort of complicated things as well. So you can see there you've got like adoption certificates, social security number cards, child support details, things like your mortgage, pharmacy info, marriage certificates, all these kind of things that you might need if a disaster strikes, and you need to obviously then use them. Go on to the next one then. So I'll put this under as intelligence. So this is about thinking of things that you might want to know, and you want to do your intelligence, you want to do all your work now to try and find out so that you're better prepared. Again, I'm not going to teach you to suck eggs. You can see some of the things that are on there. Probably the really good example of this to try and help you understand is if you live near a river. So you want to know the historical high levels of the river, flooding history, flooding areas. So if something does go wrong, there is some kind of disaster, then you know how well prepared you are should a river burst its banks. Or if there's a school disaster plan, so if there's an earthquake and the roof comes down in the school, what the school going to do, those kind of things. Next page, immediate actions on a disaster striking. So if there's an earthquake, first thing you want to do is move to safety. So if that is outside, that might be fairly easy. If it's in your house, you want to wait till all the shaking has stopped, then move to safety. You want to then do a head count, treat any life-threatening injuries, and so on, so on, so on, so on, so on. The reason I've done this, one of the biggest things that happens in a disaster with people is they panic, they just react, and they can't think what they need to do next. So this is your immediate actions that you need to do straight after a disaster. There's no thought process required. It's written down for you, and you just follow exactly what's on the list here and tick them off as you go along. So hopefully you don't forget anything. If you manage to get to the bottom of this checklist, then you've probably covered off most of the things that you need to cover off. Protection. So this is looking at how you protect you and your family. So think of this more as from a security point of view. Makes perfect sense, the things that are in there. So things like firearms, stun guns, knives, tasers, even ballistic helmets and glasses, things like that. Logistics. Now this is the one that is going to fill up most of people's head when they're trying to prepare for something. What stuff do you need and what do you have to have in place? There is a multitude of things on here that obviously these are my checklists. These are things that I've prepped for me that I'm now giving to you. This list is fairly exhaustive, but there will be things on there that don't fit my circumstances that might fit yours. So have a look through this list and understand you don't have to have everything on this list, and there may be things that are missing. You have to understand your own personal circumstances. But what's on there should be a great starter for 10 to cover most situations. So medical side of things, no matter what the scenario is, no matter what the disaster, and even just day to day, it makes sense to have a medical checklist. So these are the things that I have in my med kit. For most people, this would be more than enough. I've modified this slightly because I have had quite a bit of medical training, so there are other things that I have in my med kit that I wouldn't expect the ordinary person to have. So I've taken those out. If you have what's in here though, for most people that will cover pretty much anything and will help you keep someone alive or keep them more comfortable or treat minor injuries should disaster strike and first responders can't get to you. Next one is planning. So what kind of things do you need to think about now that you need to put in place, that you need to maybe training? It's maybe a mindset, it's maybe things that you have to buy, it's maybe things that you have to prepare. If we look on here at some of the things that you need, so for example, calculate food needs. If you go to your planners, guess what? There's a page in there that's all about calculating your food needs. So you can tick it off on this sheet once you've finished the sheet in the planner. There are things that won't necessarily have something in the planner that you're going to have to think about because your situation will be very different from mine. Like an evacuation plan. If you live in a high-rise set of condos and you're on the 12th floor, that's going to be very different from somebody who lives on the ground floor, for example, or someone who lives in a house versus someone who lives in a bungalow versus someone who lives in a ranch. All these different things will be different for your personal circumstances. So this is a way for you to have a think about what you need to do specific to your circumstances. Again, it's not exhaustive, but these are the things that I've identified for me that I want to understand, that hopefully will help you as well. Communication. Oh, why has that done that? Oh, don't know what's happened there. Anyway, training. So training is a big one. And there's a lot of things in here that you want to get trained in before disaster strikes. So things like construction training. So I don't mean building a whole new house, but for example, it might be beneficial for you to understand how to lay bricks or how to do basic carpentry and joinery. Those kind of things. First aid, definitely. Off-road driving, if you live in the middle of the country, then that might be beneficial. A rescue plan, how you're going to evacuate or extricate people that are trapped. If a house falls down, for example, how you're going to treat injuries. So it might be all well and good that you've got all this medical training, but what if you're the one that's injured and you're unconscious? How are your family going to deal with this? So there's things in there to think about, and again, it's not exhaustive. It's just for you to have a look at what's right for your circumstances. Financial, this is a big one. If everything goes wrong and there's a big disaster, cash might not be the way. Bank cards might not be the way that people will carry out transactions. So having things like bank cards are great, but you may need to find things that you can use for bartering or cash, or if it's really bad, gold, silver, just things that you can use to obviously help you survive. If you have 1 year's worth of supplies, then this probably isn't quite as relevant, but there's things on there, again, not exhaustive. It's a relatively small list because there's only so many things that you can do, but it'll give you a heads up on the things to start looking at. The important thing with financials to understand, it's not just about surviving the immediate aftermath of a disaster. This is something that you need to think more long term, because this could be something that 20 years down the line this could happen, or you've got to think maybe if you're in your 50s now, you might not be around in 20, 30 years. So it's all about planning ahead and understanding what the needs are for your family, not just immediately for you. It might be for your children 20, 25, 30, 40 years down the line. So have a think about it and think more long term, think bigger picture as well, not just the weeks after a disaster strikes. And legal side of things, there's not a lot to put in here really, and perhaps the two most important ones are the second two there. Do you have a power of attorney in place? Both a medical and a financial power of attorney, because if something happens to you, for example, you're trapped in your house when it falls down and you suffer brain damage, you're not in control of your own faculties, then you want someone that you trust to be able to carry out your wishes, whatever those are. So that's why having a power of attorney in place now means that should disaster strike and you're not in a position that you can do these things, then it will help you in a huge way. And a will completed and registered. This is not something that a lot of people want to think about. I come from a military background, and in the military, one of the things that they always drum into people is have a will. There's nothing worse than when you start having people shooting at you in a bad place when you're deployed. That's when you start thinking about a will, because by that point it's too late. This is something that you can do online, or you can go and see a lawyer. It doesn't take a lot of time, and a lot of them are just a template that you fill out. Make sure you do a power of attorney and a will. Those are the two things that will make sure that your family are protected should something happen to you. I can't emphasize that enough. And a kit list. This is pretty big. Again, not exhaustive. These are the things that I've looked at as a good starter for 10. Your circumstances will change, and there will be things that you will need that I want. So use this as a starting point and then work from there. As you can see, it's pretty big. Contacts. Now, this is another one that is often overlooked, and people really forget this one on a regular basis when they do all the prepping. If there's an earthquake, let's say something very simple. For example, you end up with two of the windows break in your house and all the glass falls out. who you're going to speak to, who you're going to find. Internet's down, so you can't get online to work out who it is that you'd call. Most people don't have a Yellow Pages or an equivalent phone book that they can look up. Word of mouth is probably not going to work that great because people will have their own lives to try and get back in order. So guess what? You're going to have to go and drive the streets. Do you have enough gas in your vehicle? Is there even someone that's local to you that can actually do the work, such as a glazier? So having all these things in place now, again, this buys you time, capacity, and lack of stress when disaster strikes if you've got all this good to go. Again, not an exhaustive list, but I think I've covered pretty much most things that are on there for most circumstances. You may have a few nuances in there that will be specific to you. For example, I haven't put in family because I know my family's numbers off the top of my head, but that might be something that you want to do. If you've got a large extended family spread out across the country, you might not know all the phone numbers, email addresses, even their physical addresses as well, which a lot of people don't know. So again, have a look at that. This ties in with the planners as well because there's a sheet on there for you to put all the contacts on. And food. This is a fairly short list because I fell foul of this in the past where I've recommended what I would think people should use. The problem with that is there's a lot of people who are quite quirky on what they like to eat, things they don't want to eat, people on special diets, people that just blatantly don't like something for whatever reason. So I've put on the basics there that will get you through most situations and keep you alive. This isn't something that will help you thrive with what's on here. This is what will keep you alive until you can find another source. So use this as a guide, use this as a handrail, but again, look at your own circumstances. This also ties in very well with your planners because there's a section on there about food and how you plan correctly with food. So have a look at that. Clothing, really important one. The big thing I want to get across in this, I live in Nevada. It's great for me planning on summer. Today, it's July, and outside, I think today it's going to be 114. That's great, apart from when all this disaster happens in the winter, and it's maybe 30 degrees outside. My shorts and t-shirt, or my Hawaiian shirt and flip-flops are just not going to cut it in the winter. So bear in mind, you've got to prep for all seasons here. And generally, I would prep for either the summer and the winter because that's the two extremes. If you cover both the summer and the winter, you're covered for throughout the year because those are the two worst case scenarios. Again, I've broken this down in areas of the body so that it makes sense and what you want to do for each part of the body. And there are a few specialised things in there. I put things, for example, like a wetsuit or dry suit. If you live near a river or you're prone to flooding, these kind of things, then it might be something that actually makes a lot of sense. If you're going to have to get in maybe a canoe or a small boat to get around. Things like gaiters, if it's going to be really muddy and it's going to be wet and you're going to be walking through grass, you don't want to obviously get yourself soaking wet. So there's quite a few options in there. So that is the checklist. So if I come out of that one, and I shall close that one down. And then if you're looking at the planners now, the planners, this is a bit more in depth. So the first thing here is why have the planners? When I first started putting this together, my wife said, why would I need to have a planner? It doesn't make sense. That's just the same as a checklist. And actually it's not. These two things complement each other. And the whole point of having the planner is that it allows you to work through things in a logical process, write them down and have all this information that you put in here that is good to go so that when disaster does strike, you've done all the work. But it's kind of like when you were at school and you were doing some sort of mathematics problem and the teacher always said to you, write down your working so that they could understand what you were doing. This is kind of the same thing. So if we start going through these planners, this is the same thing. So if something happens to you and you've put all the work in these planners and it's say your wife or your husband or your children or whoever it is that picks up this folder with everything in it, they understand how you've got to where you've got to and why you've done things. And it can help them understand what they need to do going forward. So it's really handy. So the planner covers a lot of things here. Things like area calculations. Now when I first showed my brother this, he had a head scratch. He said, why on earth would I be in the least bit interested in working out areas? I said, well, this is going to be really handy if you're doing things. For example, you want to know how many boxes of food. So here's a really good one. How much space is it going to take up if, for example, I have 50 boxes of MREs and then I have 20 boxes of ammunition, plus I have 100 gallons of water. Knowing how to work out area can help you in a big way here. So that's area, obviously, which is the outside. Go on to the next one and work out volume. So if you know how to work out these kind of things, you know how much space you need. Most people can work out something simple like a box. What about if it's something like a barrel and you have water in it and you want to understand how much water you have in it? Or it's half full, how much water do I have? And you've got 6 of these barrels, one that's 3/4 full, one that's quarter, one that's about a third of the way up. It's very difficult to estimate. So if you've got your calculations here and you've got your barrel, if you know that the water's 20 inches up from the top, you know how wide it is, then you can work out how much water you have. Really simple stuff, but actually it's the thing that gets overlooked. Most people haven't done this since they left high school, so it might not be fresh in their mind. So it's really handy having all this information. And I've got some more unusual shapes here. So like a cone and a sphere, because those are things that could actually be used. This one here, now this came about, I had a friend who, as ridiculous as it sounds, it had weather balloons. And he used to fill up these weather balloons with water and store them because he got them from his work. Yeah, he was a meteorologist and he managed to get hold of half a dozen of these. But he never knew how much water he had in it. He was always guesstimating. And he started to try and fill up one of these with a jug. And he realised after he'd put in about 20 gallons that it was going to take him best part of a day. Excuse me. So I told him the calculation, which helped him out massively. So these are the kind of things. You never know when you're going to need them, but it's all there if you need it. Energy, this is really important if you're doing things like, for example, you have a heater. You want to know how much heat you need, or how much power it's going to use, or how much fuel it's going to use. Very important calculations. Temperature, makes sense. Going ahead, things like pressure. So if you're trying to change pipe work, or you're trying to work out how much pressure maybe a fitting can withstand, all there. Moments in centre of gravity. Now again, this is the one when I showed my brother this. He said, there's no logical reason why I would need this. About a month later, we went to a hardware store and he wanted wood. He was constructing a fence in his garden. And he had giant planks of wood that were about 12 feet long. Now, unfortunately, he didn't have a pickup truck. He had a car. And his car, when he knocked down the seats in the rear of the car to put these big giant slabs of wood in, he struggled to work out whether or not they were going to fit. So he had about 5.5 feet of the car, which meant there was about 6.5 feet hanging over. And he couldn't work out before he bought them whether or not this was actually going to balance. And if so, how much weight did he need? And that's when I said, aha. Remember those sheets I sent you? Try and work out the centre of gravity and you'll be able to tell if it's going to flip over or not. And that's what he used it for. But this can be used for all sorts of things, the centre of gravity. So this is for working out if something's going to tip over. Very simple. And jump in here because we've got dodgy mouse. I'll go back. Right, there we go. So where were we? Centre of gravity. Weight makes perfect sense. There's so many things that you need: weight, length, speed, all these kind of things. The random one here, degrees to mils. So if you have a military compass, that you come across a lot of military compasses are in mils rather than degrees, so that's important to have that. Radiation, depending on what the hazards are or what the disaster is, radiation might be a real thing. It might be something that you want to look out for. Electricity, if you have an issue and you say you have your small generator that you can run, fill it up with fuel and off it goes, but you want to work out if you're going to overload it and you're going to trip the circuit. Having things like some of these calculations that are trying to work out the amount of power it's going to draw or the voltage, all these things, very important. If you have, say, let's say a 5,000 watt generator, it'll be handy to know if you can run aircon and your fridge and your freezer at the same time, because those are all three important things if you live, say, somewhere like Nevada, like myself. Or the flip side, if you live in Alaska and it's going to be cold and you want to know if your 2,000 watt electric heater, using your energy calculations and your electricity calculations, whether or not it's actually going to help. Very handy. Specific gravity. So this is used to work out liquids And you can work out a volume, but that doesn't tell you necessarily the weight or the volume of a liquid. As an example, so aviation fuel, its specific gravity is 0.8. So if you weighed that and it was 1,000 pounds, it would only weigh 800 pounds, but it has a volume. In fact, let's do this in litres. So if it was 1,000 litres and it had 800 litres, it weighed 800 kilograms, that would be 1,000 litres, even though it weighs less, if that makes sense. So the reason this is important, you might have barrels of fuel and you want to know how heavy it is. So you would look at the volume, it'd be 1,000 litres. So that would tell you, well, that's going to be 1,000 kilograms if it was water. If it's fuel, it's only going to be 800 kilograms. So actually, per volume, there's less weight, which means you can maybe store more, you can transport more. That's why it's really important. Have a look on Google if you need to understand specific gravity. But this is a really interesting calculation. It's something that'll help you out a lot depending on what the scenario is. And I've got some of the common things there with their specific gravity. On the next one, just a load of abbreviations that I've used so you don't get confused. Ground to air codes. So one of the things that happened in Hurricane Katrina, because there was such widespread devastation, one of the ways that the authorities went to look for people that needed rescuing was by helicopters. So having something like this for a disaster is really handy. And this just shows you some of the common ground to air codes that aircrew will be trained to recognise and look for to understand if people want assistance. The biggest one is this one. So you need medical assistance. And yes and no. And maybe proceeding in this direction as well. These are the ones here that you're probably more likely to use. There are other ones, yes, that you can use, but you're probably not likely to use them. But they're there anyway. So standard voice procedure. If you're using a radio, there's nothing worse than someone getting on a radio that doesn't have discipline, that doesn't know how to use a radio, and they just end up going on transmit and verbal diarrhea just comes out the mouth. So having some of the standard voice procedures here. So on the left, these columns, down here, that's the word that you would use, and here's the meaning. So for example, if someone, here we go, we'll use figures as an example. So if someone wants to say to you, I will be with you in 10 minutes, or it weighs 10 kilos, or I mean the number 10. So they would say to you, hello, or it would be Golf 50, I will see you in figures 5. So that means number 5. So people know that it is a numeral or it's a number, if that makes sense. And there are several different ones that you can use, and that's just some of them. But as you go through, you'll realise there's a lot more. So methods of radio comm. So this explains a bit more in depth about how you actually use a radio, why it's important, and some of the guidelines for you to use. If there is a disaster scenario, the last thing you want is someone getting on a radio and just transmitting for 5 minutes to basically say, I've hurt my leg. If you've ever listened to the military radio or you've ever served before, or a police radio, you'll realise that the comms on it are very short, sharp, to the point, done and dusted, and they get off the net so that they free it up for other people. So this will explain this in detail. So it'll give you how you speak, some of the discipline, ABCs, 5 Ws, and then some other guidelines for you to keep you right, save you being that guy that everyone shouts at. So this is how you actually use the radio, how you start a conversation, how you finish it, all the other bits and pieces in here. And that should be nice and simple for you. It should explain it to you if you've never used the radio before. So again, going through all these standard voice procedure, a lot of the other things that we've got here, it's quite in depth, and that's the most common ones. There are actually about 1,000 pro words that you could use, but we won't go into them all. That's just the bare bones. Morse code, it's a kind of dying art now, Morse code, but it still is relevant. I don't know if anyone from before can remember the old Nokia phones. So here's a bit of pub quiz knowledge for you. The old beeping noise, that was actually Morse code, and it was Morse code for SMS. So if you look at it, it was S, and then so it was saying SMS. So that was the ringtone. So there you go. So it's not a forgotten art completely. This is something though that all aviators will certainly know how to use. A lot of military personnel will know how to use. And a lot of civilians know how to use it, especially if they've had any exposure to radio. but it's something that you can use for communications over a large area, or you can use it for a tap code as well. So for example, if you're trapped in a building, and you want to get people's attention, you could use SOS, so dot 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 dash 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 dot dot dot. So you could tap on a pipe, you could use SOS dot 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 dash 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 dot dot dot, and that could let people know that you require help, that isn't just a random noise. And then the phonetic alphabet to use with radio traffic as well. So this is if you want to say the letter alpha. Let's say you're spelling out SOS, that would be Sierra, Oscar, Sierra, SMS, Sierra, Mike, Sierra, and you just use the word rather than the letter so it doesn't get confused over a radio net. So that's some of the stuff. Oh, just went in PowerPoint catching up. There we go. So authentication tables. These are a really important one if you're concerned about security, or you have maybe your own radio net that's just for your family or friends or community or whoever it is. I won't explain how this works. It's all explained in there, but this is something that's really handy. That's a very basic way that you can communicate with people, and you can understand if someone who's speaking on that radio net is meant to be there. Batteries. So in a disaster scenario, you definitely will need batteries. So this explains how you'd work out how many batteries you need, how long they're going to last for, and work out your requirements based on the electronics that you have. And there we go. So I've broken this down. If you need A-cell batteries, what the item is that you're going to use, how many you require, blah, 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 blah. And that'll tell you total batteries. And down here at the bottom, you tally up everything that you have put in all these columns here. So it gets you a total number there, and then you can work out how many batteries you need to buy and how many you need to have stored to work out everything that you need. And then on the bottom here, which is perhaps more important, is having an inventory and understanding how you're managing it. So if you buy 800 batteries, you want to obviously use the oldest ones first, so that you don't end up with wasted batteries running out of power as time goes on. Let me just go through this for AAAs, C cells, D cells, and then various cell batteries. So for example, smaller watch batteries, so a CR2032 for example. I've got one of those in my watch. So these are all the other batteries. And then I've broken this down further. So at the top here, this says essential items requiring batteries. So if you've calculated your battery needs and you reckon you only need batteries for 30 days, but you end up actually realising we're actually going to be out without power, without any access to anything else for 60 days, you can prioritise what you're going to use. So it'll be essential items only. If you do this beforehand, before disaster strikes, then you're good to go. So that straight away, disaster strikes, you realise you're going to be there for 3 months without any resupply. You've got this all populated already, so you don't have to think about it. It's done. And then desirable items. So essential items, if you go back one, essential items could be things like maybe your radios. That'd be a good one. You definitely want to make sure those are working. Flashlights, yes, definitely. A rescue beacon if you have one, definitely. Desirable items might be something like, I don't know, let me have a think. iPads. Bad example because that's not got batteries that you can change. It might be something like, say, one of your kids' toys. That's a desirable because it'll keep the kids sane. It'll stop them driving you up the wall because they've got nothing to do. But actually, if you've run out of batteries, the children are going to have to find something else to play with. So that's what we'd use that for. So clothing, there's just thoughts on what to consider. And what I've went over here is some of the different materials and the advantages and disadvantages, because sometimes you want a certain type of fabric, other times you'll want other fabrics, and this explains it to you in there. And then food and water requirements. And this is a really important one. Please take the time to understand what's in here and what you're going to use. There's a really good example here of required nutrients, this web link. Please use it because you can type in your parameters of you and your family and it will tell you what people need down here for the carbs, protein, fat, fibre and the water intake. One thing to remember, if you do have a woman who's breastfeeding, their needs are going to change quite significantly compared to what they would be normally, and also for a woman that is pregnant. So just bear these in mind. And then you work out what your macronutrients are. You then, if you scroll on, you can work out your food and water requirements. So Once you know what your requirements are, there's a table here, which is obviously the next page. Your daily calorie requirement, how long you expect to need food for. So let's say 90 days. And then there's how many calories you need for that duration. And then depending on what you've broken this down into, in terms of how many carbs, how much protein and how many calories you need, you can then work out what you need in your food stores. So it's all in here. I'm not going to go through it now because there's a lot in there and it'll take forever to go through it. Then taking this a step further, if you have got land that you can grow crops, this is one of the easiest things for a disaster scenario. So if you have an earthquake, your house falls to the ground and you've done all your preparation, you've got your tent and your garden, you've got your tent up, but all your food was in the house and it's all been crushed to pulp. It's under 10 tons of rubble. That's not ideal. However, if you've got your crops in your garden, you've worked out what you need, your food requirements, well, guess what? You're absolutely golden. All you need is some way to get them out the ground, which is going to be fairly easy, and then some way to cook them, which, if you've done your preparation, should be fairly easy. So this is how you work out all your requirements, and you work this out on the nutrients that they have for each individual food, and then each individual person's consumption. And then you take that a step further. So here's the vegetable nutritional profile, blank sheet. So you work out carrots, how many carbs they have, how much protein, fat, yada, yada, yada. And this is based on 2 or 3 sheets beforehand where you work out what your nutritional requirements were. And then work out the consumption that everyone would need per week based on the sheets before. And then you can plan your crops that you want to plant. So if you use carrots, let's say they've got to be planted from April to June, and then you can harvest them from August to September. So all you would do is in here, back one. All you do is you mark it up, maybe say crosses is when you need to sow the seeds, and then maybe circles when you're going to actually harvest the crops. And this again will help you plan for the future, so it's done. So if the disaster scenario hits, you've got all this information in a folder and you're good to go. And then there's vegetable spacing. Obviously, larger vegetables, say like a pumpkin, is going to need a lot more space than a carrot because of the nutrients it takes out of the ground. So this will tell you the ideal spacing between the plants and between the amount of rows. Right, so now we're going on to some of your inventory stuff. So this first example, you can see down here, this is all about weapons. So what weapon you have, if it's a firearm, caliber, the magazines that you've assigned to it. So you might have 20 magazines, but you've only got 10 of them loaded. Has it been zeroed, the weapon, when it was last cleaned? Because it might actually need regular cleaning, especially if it's high humidity or if it's dusty. Where it's stored, its serial number, and if there's any batteries required for this. So this is things for more like the batteries for a few things like lasers, sights, all these kind of things, rangefinders that go with it. And then your ammunition, much the same as your batteries, your inventory, so caliber, manufacturer type, batch number, purchase date, expiry date, and the amount that you have. Very simple, so that you know if you want, say, 10,000 rounds of ammo, and you want a third of that 9mm, a third of that 5.56, and then maybe the last third 50 cal, you can have that all broken down. You know what it is, you know what the caliber, you know the manufacturer, batches, etc. It's all in there. Right, so radios. Radios are going to be a big part of any preparation that you do, especially for disaster scenarios. Excuse me. And the reason being is radios will not only give you some way that you can communicate with family and friends, but actually, if you look down here at some of the agencies that I have, this will give you real great information in a disaster scenario, especially things like fire, police, and ambulance. Excuse me. Having these radio frequencies good to go and having a small scanner that you can listen into them will help you massively and understand what's happening. If you're trying to dial 911 for an ambulance for someone that has a broken leg and you can't get through and it's constantly engaged, you might go onto your scanner on the ambulance down here and look at maybe like the local provider's dispatch, and you might find out they're saying, we've got twice as many jobs as we can actually attend, we're prioritising now. Or if it's something like a major incident, you might know that there's maybe, I don't know, there's a shopping mall or a stadium that's collapsed and there's thousands of people involved. and that's why you can't get through. So having this information can give you the jump on other people. So if you, for example, need to know that they're going to be short of water because the water's off, you might be able to get the residual that's in the pipes, in the mains, that's sunk under the street, and get enough water before it runs out when everyone else realises an hour down the line. Really important this, and something that I can't emphasise enough. And have that information to hand. Again, it's not an exhaustive list, this, although it might appear it is. These are the main agencies that I identified that would be handy to understand. There will be ones that are local to you that make more sense. So if we go through, this is just loads of radio frequencies. The important thing is this website up here. Please visit this website. Please have a look for radio frequencies in your local area. There are some that are nationwide, and the frequencies that are now following here, that you can now see on screen, these are all the frequencies that are nationwide, that are not for a specific area. So if you live in Las Vegas, for example, you will need to dig out the Las Vegas frequencies to put in here. These ones here are generic for the whole of the country. So if we go through them, you will see most of these make sense. One point to note is the mode that these will be transmitted on. So P25 is a digital radio. You will need a specific scanner to listen to them. FM, you'll be able to listen to those on one of the real cheap scanners. So understand what you're trying to do, and I would suggest it is, if you're buying a radio or a scanner to listen in, it is one that can listen into P25 digital transmissions, because that's where you get the best information. I'm going through this. There's loads of different ones here that you can see. All sorts of different ones. All of these frequencies might not be in use at the one time. Some of them might only be in use at certain times of the day, or with certain scenarios, or with certain circumstances. So you'll just need to play with them and spend a day going through and trying to work out which frequencies are used frequently, and then you can use this to your advantage. So this last sheet here, this is for your own local frequencies. Now there's only one of these in the planner, but obviously you can print this individual page out 100 times if you want to. And it's just the same layout as before, but this is things that are local to you. So again, if I use Las Vegas as an example, you might want Las Vegas Fire and Rescue in there. You might want Las Vegas Metro Police Department in there. You will know what you need. You will know what you want. So put them in here, and again, keep all this printed out. I would suggest doing an electronic copy of this if you can, in a spreadsheet, so that you can update it quickly and print it. Right, going back then to food a little bit now, rather than vegetable patches. So this is explaining to you why food's important, and I don't mean this isn't in here to teach you to suck eggs. This is to help you understand that there are some foods that are way more important than others, and some that will give you real good benefits, some less so. And it's understanding you don't just want quantity, you want quality of food as well, because that is what will determine your long-term survival. What I've done here is basically some common foods down here, and then the use, and more importantly, how it's going to affect you. So things like pasta. A lot of people will stock up on pasta, which is great. Pasta is not a good nutritional food. Pasta is devoid of a lot of nutrition. All it gives you is carbohydrate, which is it for energy. However, if you have something like oils, so if you have something like coconut oil, you've got a lot less volume, but it's got more good for you in terms of energy than pasta has. So understanding how foods work and what's better for you long term, it will benefit you further down the line. I've got UN classes here. So the reason I've got this, if you are preparing and you want to have, say, your house absolutely prepped so that, God forbid, there's a fire when there's an earthquake, if you can, using this here, and we'll go back to that in a second, this list here, have a list of all the things that you have in your house that meet these UN classifications. Now, these are standard throughout the world. If the fire brigade or the fire service come to your house and you say to them that I have class 3, a UN class 3 in my garage that's 1,000 gallons, they're going to treat your house very differently than if you didn't have that. and they're going to understand the risk a lot better. So if you have 1,000 gallons of gas, so that you've got it for your vehicles, and that's in your garage, and you end up with a fire, guess what? They're probably going to evacuate half the street, and they want to know that because they don't want to send firefighters in there then for this to explode. So knowing this is really handy, and more importantly, having a breakdown of what you have and understanding what you have that you can let them know. And if you need more information, then please go and visit this website here. It's got a lot of good info because it is something that there are subclasses and there's a lot of information that goes with it. However, if you can say to first responders, I have UN class 1.4, they're going to know what that means. And then the important thing is now you walk around your house, remember things like your shed or your garage, make sure you go around, write out what the class is, subclass, so that'd be like class 1, and that'd be 1.4, which is things like ammunition. And then just put what it is, ammunition, size, so that might not be relevant for ammunition. If it's something like gas bottles, and you can say that they're 6 feet high, so an oxyacetylene torch, that's handy for them to know. The volume of it, so if it says something like gasoline, I've got 100 gallons, where it is, it's in my garage, and the access, unfortunately, it's in a locked cabinet, so you're going to have to take bolt cutters. That's really handy for them to know. So list that for everything in your house. And then I mentioned about contact list, so this is all your contacts that you have. So this could be things like family, friends, this could be your handyman, this could be whoever, it doesn't really matter. Work is a good example. So if my cell phone, if it was destroyed in a fire or an earthquake and I got out without it, I wouldn't have a clue what my work phone number is or how to phone my parents. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head. So having this all written down is really handy. This jumped about a little bit. I'll need to fix the order of this. So food here, again, this is just going into how much food you need, and then what is poor survival food. So there's a lot of things that people think are good for them that are actually quite bad. Things like refined carbs, not good at all. Sugar, really bad, especially in a survival situation or disaster scenario. If it rots your teeth and you're eating nothing but sugar, that's going to cause you a lot of pain if you end up with an abscess, for example, and you can't get to a dentist. So a bit more information in there. Then this is space here where I'm going to, as I get more and more links, I'm going to add them in here for you to get more information. And you can obviously put your own in here as well. So that's the end of that slideshow. If I come out of that, there we go. And hopefully that's something that's worked for you and that's worthwhile. If I just flick this for a second. So hi, you can now see me face to face now. So with these planners, the whole point of these planners is that they're not something that is meant to be absolutely exhaustive and will give you every piece of information that you need. What these are designed to do is give you a bit of a feel for what I personally do for my disaster planning, and it will give you that mindset that you'll start to develop and things that you can then start to look at under your own steam and your own time and work out what's best for you, because everybody's going to be different. Everyone's scenarios, everyone's circumstances, everyone's house, everyone's family, everyone's financial situation vary massively. So do what works for you. You do you, don't do me. These are just an example, and it gives you a great starting point. If you were to do everything that's in these planners and checklists, you will be in a fantastic situation and you'll be way better than most people. The biggest thing with this, there are 2 points I would say. One, you have to put all these things into action. There's no point in having this information and then sitting in it and not doing anything with it. You have to execute on the information that's in here. Otherwise, you've just bought a very expensive document that's going to sit on your computer and never get used. And the next thing is, please, when you fill these out, make sure your whole entire family understands them, knows where to find them, and that you have a copy somewhere else so that when your house falls down and it's a pile of rubble, the folder is somewhere that you can access it. A really good place for this is maybe in your car or in a neighbour's house, or if you have something like a shed or an outhouse, put it somewhere that somewhere else that you can get access to it should your house fall down or go on fire or it's flooded, and that you have access to it. I would also recommend an electronic copy, putting it on like the iCloud or Dropbox or Google Drive or something else so that you have an electronic copy, so that absolute worst case you can get access to it when the internet comes back online. and you have it to hand, because this information is no good if you don't have access to it. So one, you have to execute on it, you have to do the work, and secondly, you have to have access to the information and make sure your whole family understands it. So hopefully this video has explained it a lot more for you and has put a little bit more meat on the bones, and it will help you out. If you've got any questions, then please don't hesitate. Dave@bigcaliforniaearthquake.com. Dave@bigcaliforniaearthquake.com. Send me any questions you have, and I'll do my best to answer them as soon as I can. Also, if you have any suggestions of what you would like to see in the planners, what you'd like to see in the checklists, and maybe more importantly, what don't you want to see in there, because that is how these are going to improve. And when I have updates, I will publish these updates for everyone that's bought them already, and you will get them free. I'm not going to charge you again for these updates. These updates will come to you as and when I produce them. That won't be something that's happening every week. It'll be maybe every few months. When I get enough information in there to update, I'll send them out. So please keep an eye on your inbox and whitelist my email address, so that when these updates do come in, you make sure you get them. So hopefully that's been beneficial for you. Hopefully you've got something from it. Hopefully now I've been able to brain dump me down onto here, and it makes sense as to why I've done things. Again, let me know, and hope you've enjoyed this, and I'll see you later. And thanks again for buying, and thanks for helping me in my mission to make sure there's 1 million people are fully prepared for the next big disaster. Thanks. Goodbye. See you later.